Bill Self's got some dogs in the house. KU comes back from down 12 in the second half, beats Tennessee. Third place is there. Some extra money is theirs. And this was one of the most fun KU basketball experiences we've had in too long, in a while. We're going to break it down.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network. Derek Johnson here with Locked On Jayhawks. A little bit of a different digs here. I am out away for Thanksgiving week, but that cannot stop me because Kansas could not be stopped with Elmarko Jackson and Melvin Council in the second half. So they're coming to you. I'm going to come to you here as well. KU 81, Tennessee 76. We're going to recap the game, what went right for Kansas in this one. It was a lot of fun, the comeback and the display that they showed in a perfect 3-0 players era week for KU. We'll get into game awards, moments of the game, all that, what this means, and more on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. And today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. You probably could have got pretty cheap tickets to the game. There weren't a ton of fans there, but if not, there's always next year because it sounds like a lot of the Big 12 teams are going to be in it. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. So Kansas wins 81-76 against Tennessee, and it's just a wild game because I don't know. First of all, I guess something about gutsy wins in Vegas for Kansas. If you remember last year, they beat Duke in Vegas, and for a team that overall didn't feel that gutsy, that was a gutsy win. Hunter Dickinson gets ejected, and KJ was great on Cooper Flag. I don't know, maybe, I've been very adamantly against Brett Yormark wanting to move everything to Vegas. Maybe we should let him move everything to Vegas because it seems like he gets the best out of KU. That's certainly for fun there. But what a freaking win, man. I mean, what a moment for this KU team. Just super fun to watch. And that's been the thing. Like, I go back to the Duke game, a game that they lost, but we came away from that pleasantly, I don't know, excited, content about where the team was even in a loss. And it's those types of process moments that lead to results, I think, like this. And there were moments in the game where it felt like, okay, this is going to be like the Duke game where you fought hard, you showed some good things, but in the end, they had a Nate Ament, and your Nate Ament, basically, Darryn Peterson, was not there, right? But it didn't matter. And honestly, it ended up being even crazier because if you think about it from this perspective, KU's three best players, I would argue, I mean, tonight, your best players were Melvin Council and second half Elmarko Jackson and stuff. But KU's three best players overall this season are Darryn Peterson, obviously when healthy, Flory Badunga, and Tre White. And that's been showcased so far this season. Well, Darryn Peterson didn't play. Flory Badunga was 2 of 11 in the first half. And Tre White fouled out late in the second half. So basically in a game where your top three players were either out or hindered, you still beat a top 10 opponent in Tennessee. They came in ranked 10th and Ken Palm coming in. In fact, people were clamoring before this game happened. People were clamoring that Tennessee should have been in the championship game because they were like, oh, but their strength of schedule, they should be in it. And boom, you come up with a win against Tennessee despite being down in the odds. And honestly, I just remember at halftime, I texted a friend. I texted a friend at halftime. Here's exactly what I said. I said, to be honest, being down 7, because it was 41-34, when Flory is 2 of 11, no Darryn Peterson, no Dawson, 30% from the field as a team to their 52% as a team is kind of nuts. Honestly, only being down 7 when those things happened is actually kind of good for KU. But the idea there was, okay, well, maybe that shifts a little in the second half and maybe you can make a comeback. Instead, it ballooned. Instead, it became Tennessee's now up 12. And at that point, when Tennessee gets up 12, it's kind of like, okay, you can see the writing on the wall, right? This KU team is really thin right now with Peterson out, with Dawson out. Their starting 5 is each of them has played over 30 minutes in each of the first couple of games, right? Except for, I'm not sure if that's true with McDowell and Rosario. I just heard that on the pregame. Could be totally wrong. Anyway, you look at that, it's a thinner team who's playing your third game in 3 days, more tired legs, guys who maybe are playing more minutes than we're used to because of some of the injuries. And you could have easily seen it fade away against what, coming into this game, you viewed Tennessee to be the better team, right? They were favored coming into this game. And so at that moment, that's kind of what like it felt like. But then Elmarko Jackson happened. And Elmarko Jackson happened really fun. And that almost led to like a baton toss to Melvin Council happening. And this was, I mean, Jamari McDowell pitched in as well, too. And just the cool parts of those three guys leading this, right? Where, I mean, I'm a huge Melvin Council personally, but I know there's been some social media disgruntlement with some of the shooting percentages in recent games. We'll take that with what you got in the second half. With Elmarko, clearly it's been very, I don't know, maligned to this point in time. And to have a moment like that for some, I've always like heard Elmarko is a really thoughtful, good kid. Sometimes I wonder if he's like being too thoughtful on the court, right? And is he thinking too much? And I had somebody reach out to me on Twitter saying like, do you think Jock Vaughn is helping here? And honestly, like it probably is, right? Like Jock Vaughn's a very thoughtful guy and was able to translate that into a really good career. So is he helping Elmarko Jackson? Yes, probably. And if you get that Elmarko for the rest, I mean, that's probably the biggest takeaway here is Elmarko Jackson's performance, because Melvin Council is going to have other good performances as one of the starters. Elmarko Jackson, if he plays like that moving forward, he's a part of the rotation, B, he's getting huge minutes, and C, it just takes this team to another level. Like when Darryn Peterson's back, if Elmarko is that off the bench, it's going to be incredible guard rotation for KU. But just really cool. And then like Jamari McDowell, like having a guy who I'm sure a lot of people after his freshman year and even after last year when he redshirted are telling him, hey, you should probably transfer. You're going to get more playing time if you go to a smaller school. And he's like, no, screw this. Like, I'm going to fight it out. I'm going to see if I can win out. Like, and credit to him, because it felt like through most of the offseason, okay, maybe he's a little further in the rotation or higher up in the rotation, I guess I should say, than we expected. And to his credit, when the moments have been there, when guys have gotten injured or somebody else has struggled and he's gotten in there, he's taken advantage. And all of a sudden he's starting the last two games and he's hitting arguably the biggest shot of this game by making the three to make it 72-68. Just really cool that some people who are maligned in a little bit of different ways get him to that point. I think overall, besides that run by Elmarko where he scored, what was it, 10, 11 points consecutively, like the not consecutively in terms of straight, but like of KU points. And he was awesome overall. He finished with 17 points in 27 minutes for KU. That, again, is the biggest takeaway. Melvin Council is just so much fun. And for him to play 38 minutes in the third straight game and be better in the second half when you should be more tired than the first half is just a thing. And that's, I guess, something like Melvin Council is a second half player. He is not a first half player to this point in the season. I guess one of the negatives would be Melvin Council first half, but the second half certainly biggest positive here. But Tre White, I know he obviously fouled out at the end, but before he fouled out, he was great. He had 14 points and 6 rebounds in 20 minutes for KU. So again, they made big part of this comeback or completed the win with Tre White fouled out. That is really impressive that KU was still able to do that. But his performance makes me even feel better about where Tre White is at. He's consistently putting this run of play together. It's not just one good game, one bad game. This is what, 4 or 5 straight games that Tre White's been really good for KU. So that's awesome. As far as some of the biggest negatives, just to quickly mention some of those, I mean, Flory's offensive game in the first half, it was better in the second half. I think really, though, it's not like a long-term concern for me. Not a lot of teams have as many like strong and long bigs that Tennessee has, and the number of them. They had like 4 or 5 of them. And on top of it, it was just kind of I think a learning experience for Flory. Like in the first half, there were a couple times where he missed bunnies around the rim, although I thought he got fouled on at least one of them, if not both, to his credit. But I think it was just more he was just settling into, deeper shots than he's used to. He was letting the Tennessee defense kind of win, so to speak, and that wasn't his game. But I think he figured that out a little bit more in the second half, and I think Bill Self adjusted, certainly for the rest of the team. I think we also learned that KU's bigs this week, this is a week-long perspective. Like you look at the Notre Dame game, those are stretch bigs. KU did pretty well with the big men there, right? You think about the Syracuse game, those are athletic bigs. KU did pretty well there. This game, the bigs labored a little bit more. And even me saying that, like Flory still found a way to inch his way to 13.7 rebounds. Bryson Tiller, just 6 points, but 8 rebounds. But certainly the 19 points from your two bigs on 6 of 19. I think the takeaway here is when you're looking at potential matchups that could cause Kansas more concern, maybe it's the rugged, strong bigs that you worry more about than the other ones. Beyond that, the other biggest, I guess, negative would just be the Cole Rosario. The threes are really off. Even the one he made, he was 1 of 5, was banked in. You just want to see that tighten up. But I still do have hope that Cole Rosario is going to be a player down the road. And heck, as moments were fading was Elmarko Jackson going to be a player down the road for KU? Well, and that turned out okay. So give these guys time sometimes, and it works out pretty well. But I think the bottom line is this. Bill Self has some dogs. Also, if you missed the Melvin Council postgame, oh my gosh, you have to check it out. But this is a fun team, man. After the Duke game, they lost the game, but I'm riding with this team, and I continue to ride with this team. They are fun, they're athletic, and even in the moments that they've lost, the North Carolina game was just bad execution in the second half for a young team trying to figure stuff out. In the Duke game, it was, I guess you could just say, like, you were outgunned, right? You didn't have Darryn Peterson, and they probably had more talent overall on the court. But they're not losing, or the moments they're not losing, or the games that they're whatever. It's not because of the mentality or because they're not a fit for what Bill Self wants to do. And I think it is just, it's weird to say they're an aesthetically pleasing team because there are moments where the offense, I mean, they shot 42% today. There are moments where the offense is clunky. There are moments where they can't score in the half court. But it's an aesthetically pleasing style of basketball to me. I love watching this team. All right, we're going to continue on with moments of the game, stats of the game, awards, all that. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, and we are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can get action with the upcoming college football games that are throughout the weekend. NFL, obviously Thursday, Thanksgiving, big NFL day. NBA's back as well, and obviously college basketball feast week continues on. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to make that fourth quarter comeback. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head over to FanDuel.com, sign up, play your game with FanDuel. It's the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks again for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks. Thank you to the Everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. I challenge you, if you are thankful for Locked On Jayhawks, and I'm thankful for you, like, honestly though, seriously, like, for Thanksgiving, everybody who listens to the show, like, thank you guys so much. Go check out the KU Utah preview. I know it feels like a bit of a slog after what we saw tonight with basketball, but help me out, please. Anyway, okay. Moments of the game for KU. I think early on, like, the Bryson Tiller dunk was a lot of fun just in terms of being a fun play. But I really don't want to start this until the second half when Elmarko had again, I forget if it was 10 or 11 straight. I honestly don't remember if he made the free throw or missed it. I think he missed it. So it might have been 10 straight points on the and one that he had, but he had 10 straight of KU's points. He had a couple threes in there, which that feels like found money, but he looked so confident. And honestly, like, the one that comes to mind to me the most, I'm just going to call this right now. I don't know. Okay. There's a lot of good moments, but the Elmarko moment of the game, he stripped Nate Ament on a drive. I mean, he's given up 7 inches on him, something like that. KU very clearly in this game kept throwing guards at him, which I think was a testament to Nate Ament's at 6'10", like, guard skills. And Elmarko strips him. And then I forget if it was the next offensive possession, like immediately after, or if it was like one after. But it was one of the most aggressive, confident drives that I've ever seen Elmarko Jackson take. And he goes to the cup and he ends up getting there's a late contest from a help defender coming over that makes it a tough shot, and he floats it up and in. Even if he missed it though, sometimes the knock on Elmarko is you're this really gifted athlete, like, be fearless, drive to the lane. And that was a moment where, regardless of the result, he ended up making it. It's like, he was fearless in that moment. And maybe it just took a little bit of confidence to get him there with those threes. And you hope that carries over. But that was so much fun. I also think the low-key moment of the game was playing Paul Mbia. I think, Paul Mbia ends up playing 3 minutes. He scores 2 points on kind of a loose ball that he picked up and laid in. That was a nice moment for KU, and it was important. But I just think having him out there for a few minutes, just to give your other two big lineup a little bit of rest, and just to, it felt like, if we're giving out an award in this game, we could give out the football team award to Tennessee, because, like, they play a little bit of football on the basketball court, and just to have a little, like, oh no, you've been trying to, like, trump us with your size. Okay, we have the biggest dude on the court. So like that for a couple minutes and just setting a tone. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it too much. The Council run of and ones. He had 3 and ones in this game. That was certainly fun. And then there was another one where it wasn't even an and one, where it was like a strong drive and a layup. And then I think if you're just looking at the specific like play of the game, it's 68-66, and Jamari McDowell like steps into a 3 with confidence, a few feet behind the 3-point line. It was a good look. It was the right job to take it. But again, you wonder if you're a role player in that moment, like, are you shying away from it? And he was not at all. And I appreciated that. And that's something we mentioned earlier this week. I forget which game we're talking about, but we mentioned how, it was nice to see Jamari, like I forget if he missed the shot before or something, but it was just nice to see him have the confidence to be like, no, I'm stepping into this. I'm taking the shot, when you'd see other moments where, some other younger players or whatever would just pass it up after you missed the first one or something. And I think that carried over into this game. He was not afraid of that moment. He was not afraid of that shot, and he knocked it down. And I'll make that the moment of the play of the game. But the moment of the game is the Elmarko run for sure. Stat of the game for KU. I mean, shooting 41% from 7 of 17, a little bit lower volume, but that was, KU couldn't have won without that. And obviously, when you were the underdog here, you were going to need a solid 3-point shooting game for a team that's overall not, the best 3-point shooting team. Also, 26 of 30 at the foul line. You were excellent at the foul line. So just overall, I think you would say the stat of the game, you could argue, is the shooting for KU. But also, I would point to the turnovers. Again, KU is not forcing many turnovers. I guess that's just going to be a thing this year. But KU only had 9. You had 15 of them last game, and now you're playing a Tennessee team that, certainly plays physical defense, and you only had 9. That was a big part of the game, I think, for KU. So I think you could kind of point to either of those two, and that would lead you in the right direction. Plus, KU, another game where they have 8 blocks. That would be another one where you're 8-4 in blocks in the end. But yeah, I am going to go with the shooting for KU. That was pretty critical, obviously, in the end for Kansas. Our awards of the game, our dog moment of the game. We mentioned we're going to start doing this every game. I mean, a lot of dog moments, I think, for KU. I kind of want to take that Jamari McDowell one. You know what? Let's just pick the Melvin Council in honor of him again, starting this, getting 1 billion and ones and continuing to, because again, it was not a pretty first half for Melvin Council. Let's see. What did he go in the first half here? Melvin Council in the first half was 2 of 8 shooting. So that's actually better. There was 0-7 from the game before. So we're moving in the right direction. But the second half, Melvin Council was 12 points on 9 shots with 4 rebounds, 2 assists. He played all 20 minutes. So yeah, I mean, all the end ones he got were, the dog moments of the game for KU. And then our last award here is the comp of the game, comparison of the game. So KU actually wound up playing, obviously a different order, the exact 3 same teams that Houston played. And I mean, if we're taking this step further, like Iowa State ended up playing Syracuse and just blasted them more than Kansas and Houston beat them combined. So, Iowa State does look very good. Tip of the cap, how they look this week. But point being, Houston is the team who was the preseason pick to win the Big 12. Houston's won the Big 12 the last 2 years. They're a little bit of a different team, but they have a lot back from a team who played for the national title last year. Point being, the bar for this year, you would just look at in the early part of the season and say, okay, if you can be as good as Houston or better than Houston, you're going to have a good shot to potentially win the Big 12, right? And what's going to be a very difficult conference. And obviously, again, like maybe Arizona ends up being better. Maybe Iowa State ends up being better, right? Maybe Kansas ends up being better. But if that's the initial comparison, if that is the initial, line, the litmus test that you want to draw, okay, well, they played the same 3 teams. Kansas went 3-0. Houston went 2-1. Kansas had a plus 26 point differential. Houston had a plus 11. So I say that not to denigrate Houston. I think Houston's a really good team and they have some young players. They're going to get better. I say that to say this Kansas team did all that without Darryn Peterson, their best player. Sky's the limit for this team, and that's pretty darn exciting. All right, let's get to our game balls and what's next for KU. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We are brought to you on today's episode by Game Time. You can get tickets to the upcoming KU-Utah game for pretty cheap over on Game Time. College football's here. College basketball is back. You can get tickets to those over on Game Time. I'm looking at tickets as low as $5. No kidding. $5 over on Game Time. I'm also looking in the end zone, section 115. This is listed as a great deal on Game Time. Row 10 for $48. There are plenty of available tickets and seats for the KU-Utah game. You can find some of those great deals over on Game Time. Plus, you can see the image of the seat view so you know what you're getting into. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Thanks for joining us again on Locked On Jayhawks. And again, check out our KU Utah preview coming at you tomorrow on the show. All right, offensive game ball for KU. Do we go Council or do we go Elmarko Jackson? I think we do have to go Elmarko because here's the difference. Council 17 points on 17 shots. Again, mostly because of the first half. Elmarko 17 points on 7 shots is incredible. Elmarko also had 1 assist. Did have 3 turnovers. Melvin Council had 4 assists, 0 turnovers. That's nice to have there. So you would give him a feather in the cap for that one. But I am going to go Elmarko. Elmarko's our offensive game ball here. He was excellent for KU. And when Kansas was kind of lost at sea, he found the island, so to speak. He got them back within striking distance for Council to be able to make the next move. Our defensive game ball of this one. Okay, so you get McDowell with 2 steals and a block. That's 3 stocks. Council had 2 blocks, low-key. Flory had 3 blocks and a steal. When you look at Tennessee, I go back to the idea, though, that Jacoby Gillespie, who came in, put up big-time numbers, especially in this tournament, he only goes 5 of 19 for the game. Now, a big part of that was just missing a bunch of threes, but do we look at Melvin Council for that and say, I mean, there were times, I don't know, KU was switching. It was different players. Gosh, this is a hard one. Because Vernon Carey, Jalen Carey, Vernon's his older brother who went to Duke. Jalen Carey killed KU off the bench, 11 points and 10 rebounds. So I don't really want to pick one of KU's bigs because the combination of him and, Estrella got 10 off the bench as a big. Para got 7. I don't want to pick one of them. I could almost pick McDowell. Again, you look at the 2 steals and a block, and he had a lot of time defending Nate Ament, who Nate Ament looked really good, hit some big shots. Nate Ament was still just 5 of 15 from the floor. So you know what? Let's go Jamari McDowell. Let's give him a defensive game ball. And then our overall game ball is going to go with Elmarko Jackson. I think you could actually argue if you wanted to. Again, you could argue Melvin Council for the overall game ball. You could honestly argue Jamari McDowell because the defense, if we're giving him that with the big 3 at the end. But yeah, Elmarko Jackson gets our overall game ball as well. Okay, what's next for KU? So they're going to be off the rest of the week, and then they're back at it Tuesday. It doesn't get any easier. In fact, probably gets harder. They're going to be taking on UConn. Now, they do have the friendly conflict. They're going to be a little more fans in the stands for Tuesday's game when they take on UConn than there were in this final game, but that'll be a really fun one. Will Darryn Peterson be back? Okay, I hope this doesn't happen, but if KU loses their first game with Darryn Peterson back after winning all these games, there's going to be people being, who have some ridiculous takes when it's probably just going to be either UConn played a really good game or hey, you have to adjust when you bring new players in there. But ideally, you're able to pick up where you left off here and add Darryn Peterson and just keep it soaring. And then the sky's the limit, like I said, to end last segment for this team. But you have the UConn game, then you have the upcoming Missouri game on a neutral site at the T-Mobile Center. You have the game coming up at NC State. So this is a really difficult part of the non-con and the schedule for KU, but it'll be kind of like it is in Big 12 play. And then it'll be a couple easier games from there and then on to Big 12 play where you're trying to compete for a conference crown. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. Please check out the KU Utah preview, and we'll be back for a postcast with whatever happens over there. See you next time on LOJ.
Bye.